In a world that constantly demands conformity, a different narrative is beginning to take shape. It is not found in institutions or broadcasted through traditional channels. Instead, it emerges quietly through patterns, experiences, and subtle shifts in personal awareness. At the center of this shift is a growing realization that balance is not only a moral ideal, but a universal principle that operates without external enforcement. The notion that actions yield consequences is often simplified through ideas of karma or justice. But what is being observed now, particularly among individuals who have long been marginalized or misunderstood, is not merely a return to balance, it is a correction unfolding in real time. The individuals who once faced silent opposition or systematic exclusion are no longer remaining silent. Their presence, once disregarded, now carries visible weight. These individuals are not seeking recognition through volume or confrontation. Their strength is quiet, often understated, yet unmistakable. It's not the kind of power that disrupts a room through force, but one that changes its frequency. The people often referred to in spiritual language as chosen ones are beginning to recognize that their struggles were never random, and their setbacks were not failures, but recalibrations. What once appeared as rejection or failure was, in many cases, redirection. Individuals who felt they were not heard or seen are now observing the same systems that once ignored them become unsettled by their presence. This is not a narrative of revenge. It is a narrative of response, a quiet correction rooted in what some call universal law. This report explores 12 major principles emerging from this unfolding pattern of spiritual awakening, the first of which is clarity on signs and internal alignment. From a young age, many individuals feel an unexplainable tension between their internal awareness and the expectations imposed upon them. They are often told to conform, to stay quiet, and to follow an approved path. Yet, within them, there is resistance, not as rebellion, but as recognition that the system they were born into was not built with them in mind. This growing awareness is not tied to a specific religion, culture, or ideology. It presents itself through an inner sense that something about the surrounding world lacks authenticity. For these individuals, even achievement often feels hollow. The conventional measures of success, wealth, approval, or popularity, are not satisfying. They are, in essence, being asked to operate in a system that never intended for them to thrive within it. For those who experience this disconnect, it is critical to understand. What feels like a personal shortcoming may, in fact, be an indicator of misalignment with a system that was never meant to reflect their purpose. One of the most common barriers to individual growth is the persistent need for validation. In a society where social metrics often determine value, approval has become a currency. However, for those on this path of spiritual clarity, approval is no longer required to move forward. The need to explain oneself to others, especially those who are not equipped to understand the depth of the journey, often leads to unnecessary delay. The call now is to move without applause, to act without consensus. This is not defiance, it is alignment. It is an understanding that some voices will not hear you because they were never meant to. When an individual stops seeking permission to become who they are, they free themselves from the constraints of collective expectation. In doing so, they also remove themselves from cycles of burnout and disappointment that stem from chasing affirmation in the wrong places. From early childhood, individuals are socialized into belief systems and roles. These roles are usually designed for stability, predictability, and control. Yet for a subset of the population, these roles begin to feel increasingly foreign. They observe, question, and ultimately reject the scripts handed to them. This rejection is not always overt. It may appear as withdrawal, discomfort, or quiet questioning. But over time, it becomes evident that what was once seen as normal no longer holds weight. These individuals do not reject society out of anger, they do so because their internal truth no longer allows them to stay in a system misaligned with their values. Breaking this pattern often leads to social friction. There will be resistance. But it is important to recognize that change at any level begins with someone who no longer agrees to the script. There is a repeated pattern where individuals attempt to fit themselves into systems, groups, or relationships that do not reflect their authenticity. In many cases, this results in internal compromise. Dimming one's abilities, withholding truths, or pretending to be less in order to be accepted. This tendency to force fit is a survival mechanism. But it comes at a cost: reduced self-esteem, compromised energy, and in some cases, long-term stagnation. The world may not have been constructed for individuals who see and feel beyond surface reality, but this does not mean that adaptation is the solution. Those experiencing this must recognize that discomfort in unaligned spaces is not a flaw, it is evidence of spiritual resistance. The next step is not to suppress that discomfort, but to listen to it. The pursuit of traditional success often leads individuals down paths that appear promising but leave them unfulfilled. The accumulation of material success is not inherently wrong, but when it becomes the goal rather than the byproduct of aligned purpose, the cost is often spiritual. Numerous public figures have reported feelings of emptiness despite achieving society's highest markers of accomplishment. The reality is that metrics like wealth, recognition, and influence do not guarantee peace. For those aligned with a higher purpose, fulfillment is found not in the spotlight, but in resonance. True success, in this context, is measured by clarity of direction, peace of mind, and the ability to stay aligned even in silence. As individuals begin to step outside of pre-programmed narratives, they often become labeled too intense, too different, too serious. But this labeling is a defense mechanism from those still operating within the illusion. The rejection of culturally sanctioned ideals, status, power, vanity, does not mean one is disconnected. Often, it signals a deeper form of connection, one that no longer allows participation in illusions. These individuals see through the constructed nature of mass belief and choose to walk in quieter, but more aligned, truths. This clarity will not always be welcomed. But it is precisely because it disrupts falsehoods that it matters. A common misinterpretation of rejection is to view it as personal. But from a higher vantage point, rejection often acts as filtration. For individuals on a distinct spiritual or self-aware path, being excluded from groups, roles, or relationships is less about their shortcomings and more about energetic misalignment. When one is rejected, the instinct may be to internalize it, to seek answers or attempt re-entry. But the more productive response may be to reframe the rejection as a form of redirection. Certain environments may not be hostile, but they are not built to accommodate truth. When truth enters those spaces, disruption follows. This pattern is familiar to anyone whose presence has repeatedly triggered unease in others, without explanation. The tension is not personal. It is often the consequence of truth entering an environment unprepared to handle it. Understanding this dynamic allows the individual to move without resentment, but with clarity. One of the more difficult challenges for individuals who sense they are called to something greater is the feeling of invisibility. There is a gap between what they sense within and what the world reflects back. During this stage, it is common to feel delayed, forgotten, or overlooked. Yet over time, this period of invisibility often reveals itself as preparation. The lack of external acknowledgement may actually serve as a protective buffer, allowing for internal development without interference. Growth in isolation may not be glamorous, but it is often more effective than public evolution under constant scrutiny. Rather than resisting periods of obscurity, individuals are encouraged to view them as incubation. Once clarity is achieved and internal stability is developed, external recognition tends to follow. But it must not precede the preparation, or the structure may collapse under its own visibility. In environments that rely on surface-level interaction and silent consensus, the presence of someone who sees beneath the surface can create immediate discomfort. This discomfort may manifest as avoidance, silence, or criticism, and it is easy to misinterpret it as failure. But presence, true, aligned, non-performative presence, disrupts. And in a world that often relies on illusion for stability, disruption is mistaken for threat. This is where it becomes important to differentiate between reaction and reflection. When others react to your presence, it does not necessarily mean that you are causing harm. It may mean that something in you is revealing something in them that they have not yet acknowledged. In such cases, your presence acts not as provocation, but as mirror. Those who feel deeply threatened by your presence may not be reacting to your words or actions, but to the shift your energy creates. The goal is not to be feared, but to be aware that your energy speaks, even when your voice does not. For individuals aligned with deeper intuition or insight, hesitation can be costly. While reflection is valuable, excessive delay, often disguised as caution, is frequently rooted in fear. And fear, when given space, multiplies. There are moments when clarity will not be complete. Decisions may need to be made with partial information, trusting in direction rather than certainty. Those who wait for all signs to align perfectly may find that they have missed their window. Progress, in these cases, is less about external permission and more about internal agreement. The longer one delays action, the more doubt gains traction. The call to move, therefore, is not about speed, but about recognizing when preparation has become procrastination. This principle is especially relevant to those who sense that time is shifting quickly, that opportunities no longer return in the way they used to. For these individuals, delayed movement may result in delayed alignment, and by extension, missed timing. Not everything can be rescheduled. While strategic silence can be powerful, there comes a point when silence transforms from discipline into disconnection. There is a distinction between quiet strength and suppressed truth. The former stabilizes, the latter fractures. Many who carry deeper insight or personal experiences remain quiet, not from fear, but from fatigue. However, the time may come when silence becomes complicity. In environments where distortion or manipulation is present, the refusal to speak can unintentionally protect the very structures one was called to dismantle. Voices, when used correctly, are not for self-promotion. They are for illumination. The stories and experiences individuals carry are not incidental. They serve as keys, guiding others out of systems they don't even realize they are in. By remaining silent, the individual withholds a tool someone else might have needed. This is not a mandate to broadcast. It is an invitation to speak strategically, when it matters, and to recognize that suppression of truth may not always be self-protective. Sometimes, it is generationally costly. The final message in this sequence is not one of destination, but of orientation. Every individual reaches a point where the internal signal becomes too strong to ignore. This is not about charisma, opportunity, or ambition, it is about obedience to one's own clarity. This point is marked by a shift in decision-making. The individual stops asking, "Is this safe?" and begins asking, "Is this aligned?" That one question changes everything. It bypasses fear, rewrites timelines, and activates dormant potential. There is no reward for waiting until the world understands you. The activation of purpose often comes before external recognition. It is rarely convenient and almost never predictable. But once an individual says yes, not just intellectually, but through consistent action, something irreversible begins. Alignment does not always come with fanfare. Sometimes, it arrives as quiet resolve. But the outcomes speak for themselves. The confusion fades. The distraction weakens. And clarity becomes a constant companion. When individuals accept their role, not in arrogance, but in quiet authority, they begin to see the full architecture of their journey. The delays, the detours, the denials, they weren't setbacks. They were recalibrations. This isn't a movement that can be categorized, marketed, or contained. It is not religious, though many find spiritual grounding in it. It is not political, though it often challenges existing structures. It is not loud, but it is undeniable. The individuals described in this two-part analysis, those often referred to as chosen in spiritual discourse, are not selected through merit or status. They are identified by resilience, clarity, and the ability to see what others overlook. Their role is not to dominate, but to align. Their impact is not in how many follow them, but in how many awaken beside them. And their presence? It continues to disrupt every system built to function without their participation. They were never designed to blend in. They were always meant to stand out. As we reach the conclusion of this message, understand that what you've just heard was never intended to entertain. It was meant to awaken. The words were not designed to echo in your ears temporarily, but to settle deeply into your awareness, to remind you of who you've always been beneath the programming, the rejection, and the distractions. There comes a point in every journey when silence is no longer enough, when observation must shift into execution. And for the chosen ones, that moment is now. You've walked through confusion. You've stood alone. You've been misunderstood, underestimated, and in many cases, ignored entirely. But none of that defines your identity. What defines you is the truth you carry, one that cannot be validated by popular opinion or erased by opposition. It's important to remember that clarity often comes after conflict. Insight follows isolation. And the light you now carry wasn't gifted to you by the world, it was preserved in you despite it. You are not stepping into power. You are simply remembering it. The strength that got you through every loss, every betrayal, every moment you questioned your own worth, it was never accidental. It was evidence. In a world full of noise, your clarity is a disruption. In a culture built on replication, your originality is a challenge. And where most fold under pressure, you emerged with perspective. That's what separates you. That's what they couldn't predict. And that's what the world, knowingly or unknowingly, needs. If you felt like your silence was being taken for weakness, let this message confirm otherwise. Your restraint was wisdom. Your calm was discipline. You weren't inactive, you were aligning. Now the alignment is complete. You no longer need to over-explain. You don't need to chase acceptance. You're not here to argue with those who refuse to understand. Your focus now belongs to the mission ahead, because while many were busy trying to belong, you were becoming the one they'll follow when the illusion finally collapses. They'll say you changed, but the truth is, you've only just returned to yourself. This version of you isn't new, it's original. It's the version that was hidden behind labels, filtered through expectations, and pushed aside by those too small to see your value. Let them misunderstand. Let them talk. You're not here for applause. You're not here to be seen. You're here to move something, silently, surely, and without permission. Because the ones who shake systems rarely come with fanfare. They walk quietly, carry deep truth, and act when the moment demands it. That moment is now. So walk differently. Speak with clarity. Show up without seeking approval. You've already been appointed, long before the world ever acknowledged your presence. And for those still unsure, still waiting for signs or confirmations, let this final thought settle in: the sign you've been asking for is not outside you. It's in the persistence of your calling. It's in the clarity that follows your discomfort. It's in the undeniable knowing that despite everything that tried to bury you, you never stopped rising. This isn't the end of the message. It's the beginning of your movement. Now that you know, now that you've remembered, act accordingly. You are not here to repeat patterns. You are here to set new ones in motion. And the world? It will adjust. If you've made it this far, this message wasn't just meant to inspire you, it was meant to activate you. What you heard today wasn't random, and it definitely wasn't ordinary. It was a reminder. A personal echo from a higher realm confirming that your calling has always been real. That you were never just going through life, you were being prepared. Every pause, every silence, every rejection, it was all part of the recalibration for who you were always meant to become. But now it's time to stop watching from the sidelines. This moment is your invitation to move intentionally. Not because you have something to prove, but because you finally know who you are. And when someone remembers their identity, their presence begins to shift the atmosphere, without saying a word. So here's what happens next. If this message stirred something in you, pause and take action, real, conscious action. First, hit the like button. This is not about numbers. It's a digital agreement. An energetic confirmation that you're no longer playing small. That you recognize your moment when it arrives, and you choose to stand in it. Second, subscribe to this channel. This isn't entertainment, it's alignment. The truth is, if this message found you once, it will again. And as more is revealed, you'll need clarity, consistency, and a space that reflects the journey you're on. This is that space. This is that time. Third, drop the number 144,000 in the comments. This isn't just a number, it's a signal. A way of marking yourself among the called. Not because you're better, but because you're aware. Aware that something larger is unfolding. Aware that you've been tapped on the shoulder long before this moment to step into something greater than titles, followers, or validation. This call to action isn't about performance. It's about placement. About stepping into the place where your voice carries weight, your silence is strategic, and your walk becomes a testimony. The world will continue to try and pull you back into patterns that never suited you. But this is your reminder, you're not going back. You're not waiting for the world to catch up. You're walking with a higher rhythm now. And in this rhythm, you no longer chase what dims you. You no longer explain what was never meant to be understood. You no longer apologize for your intensity, your clarity, or your design. You stand. You speak. You lead. Quietly if needed, boldly when called, but always with intention. So remember this channel, this message, and this moment, they're not just content. They're confirmation. Confirmation that you're not broken, behind, or out of place. You are awakening. And everything they used to try to silence you is about to become the evidence of why you were always chosen. You're not here for applause. You're here for alignment. You're not here to convince anyone. You're here to become undeniable. So don't just click away and forget. Mark this moment. Revisit it when you doubt. Return to it when you need to remember. The gate has opened. The message has landed. Now it's your turn. Say yes, not just in the comments, but in the way you show up from this day forward. Walk like the one who remembers. Speak like the one who cannot be silenced. And live like someone who knows they weren't just called, they were chosen. We'll see you on the path. You're not alone anymore.